Hello everyone, this is Professor Kristl, and this is the fifth and last of our videos for Property 1. And today we want to talk about final exams. In this video I hope to discuss sort of why we do final exams and to suggest some general strategies that you can use as you try to prepare and get ready and survive the final exam process. In this first part, I want to focus on that, why do we do this, and start to suggest those strategies. And then in part 2, we'll complete our analysis of strategies that you can use. All right, so let's start. Why do we do these final exams? And, you know, part of the reason why we got to ask this question is that, let's face it, final exams are stressful. In many classes, your final exam is the only basis for your grade. So you really got to perform on the exam date in order to do well in the class. That puts a lot of stress, a lot of pressure on you. And what compounds the problem is the fact that, you know, final exams are not what practice is really like. You will never have a client walk into your office and say, all right, here's my legal problem. Now, you can't look at any notes, you can't do any research, you can't talk to anybody, tell me what the answer is. Right? Practice isn't that way. You're always going to turn to a colleague, you're going to do some research, you're going to try to figure some things out. So, if it's really stressful and it's not exactly reflective of what practice does, it's probably legitimate to ask, all right, why do we do this? Why do we have to go through all this pain and this struggle? Well, let me suggest to you that there are some reasons why we do finals. First, a final exam tests your knowledge on what has been covered during the class. You know, do you understand the rules to the point where you can recognize them? Oh, this is a bailment case. Oh, this is a negligence claim in torts class. And also, have you learned how to recognize the law and then apply it to a factual situation? Because while a client will not walk in and ask you to answer a question about a particular area of the law without the ability to look at any notes or anything like that, at the same time, there is an expectation that you are going to be able to quickly identify the appropriate areas of law and the appropriate places you need to do your research and the questions you need to ask your other attorneys. So, it tests your knowledge of the law and your ability to apply it. Second, we do final exams because, in a sense, we're preparing you for the ultimate final exam, the bar exam. You know, as hard as it may seem to think about getting property law into your head and doing a 4-hour exam on property law, on the bar exam, in connection with the essays, you're going to have maybe 20 different topics all in your head at the same time, and the ability to call upon them in order to answer a particular question on the bar exam. So, the bar exam is like a final exam. You will not have notes, you will not be able to do research, you can't talk to anybody. And so we're starting to train you to get ready to be able to take and pass that ultimate final exam. And third, the reason why we do finals is that we want you, by having to study and learn the information to take the exam, to develop that storehouse of legal knowledge that will allow you to be a successful practitioner. You know, while the client will not come in and say, you can't look at any notes, answer my question, the client is going to walk into your office and expect you to be able to very quickly determine that you need to look at tort law or property law in order to answer their question. That you need to be able to identify and focus your research so that it is efficient and it answers the client's question. So you're starting to develop that storehouse that allows you to make those quick calls by having to study this information and put it into your head. And so by doing finals, you've actually got to learn the law and get it in your head so that it will be available when you're out in practice. You may or may not find that convincing, but the reality of the situation is you're going to have to take finals. So, what can we do? How can we prepare? Let me suggest that there are things you can do before the exam. That's where a lot of your preparation is going to happen. But also strategies that you can use during the exam and even after the exam that might help you do better and survive the final exam process in a good and positive way. Let me start out by talking about some of the before things you can do, and we'll finish up this first half of the video on that point. All right, so what can you do to prepare for final exams? Well, the first thing I think you ought to do is you ought to understand what it is the professor is going to want you to do on the exam. You know, some professors do exams and they want you to issue spot, that they give you a very dense fact pattern and you're supposed to be saying, oh, I see this, oh, I see that, and you're just trying to get out all those different issues that are lurking within the facts. Others want you to sort of take one side, argue that side, then argue the other side, so that you can have a full presentation of all the potential issues and all sides of each issue. I like to be able to have you do three things. First, I want you to be able to recognize what rule of law is at issue. So, oh, that's a bailment question. Second, once you've recognized what the issue or the area of law is, that you have the ability to tell me what the rule is. Well, there are 4 elements to a prima facie case for bailment. A, B, C, D. Right? So that you can recognize the rule and tell me what the rule is. And then thirdly, that you have the ability to take that rule and apply it to the factual situation. So to look at the facts and say, under these facts, we see that elements 1 and 2 are present because there's an agreement and here's how it works. But element 3 is not, and let me tell you why. To me, that's what the practice of law ultimately involves. Recognizing what rules involved, knowing what the rule is, and then applying that rule to the facts. So that's what I'm looking for in your exam. But whether it's me or anybody else, you should find out what the professor wants. Because when you do the exam in a way and providing the kinds of things the professor wants, you got a better chance of getting a good grade. So find out, ask how the professor is going to look at these exams and what the professor is looking for. Second, and this is almost as important as knowing what the professor is. In fact, it's probably more important. You've got to have a good outline. You've got to have distilled and condensed the essential ideas that came out of class and come out of the readings, and have them in a form that allow you to learn it, get it into your head, so that you can then use it while you're answering the exam. Having an outline that distills is critical to your ability to do well on any exam. And you know, sometimes I have students who come to me and say, you know, I knew that, but I just didn't see it, or I didn't recognize it, or I forgot to say it. And so one of the things that I suggest about an outline is that you might want to also think about creating what I call a topical outline. That is, take each of the topics that we did and create a list of here's all the different things we talked about under that topic. So that you have sort of a mental checklist that you can go through when you're confronted with a problem. That way you're not going to miss an issue. You know, if it's landlord-tenant, you say, okay, well, gee, is there an issue about the type of tenancy? I can talk about that. Is there an issue about a tenant transfer? I can talk about that, right? But by going through the topics that we covered, that creates a great sort of double check that allows you to make sure that you've been complete in your analysis. Third, if you do not understand something, get answers. ask your fellow students, talk to the professor. All right, the professors here have great open door policies. I certainly do, but every professor does. If you don't understand some topic, ask questions so that you will understand it. You've got to know it for the exam, so make sure that you do. And ask questions if you don't, because that's the only way you're going to find out and make sure you do know it for purposes of the exam. All right, so those are 3 things that you can do prior to the exam. In part 2 of this video, we're going to talk about what else you can do before, and then the during and the after.